Welcome, collectors, to this episode of Diecast Emporium Military Mondays. On this installment, we're going to dive deep into the Bradley Infantry Fighting Vehicle family. Basically, there are two main versions of the Bradley family of vehicles. Now, there are some subsectors in there, but for the most part, the M2 and M3 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles are light armored tracked personnel carriers that provide support for mechanized infantry and armored cavalry support. The vehicle is usually deployed to support the M1 Abrams tank. As I mentioned before, the Bradley family currently consists of two main vehicles, the M2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicle and the M3 cavalry fighting vehicle. There are some subtle differences, but the main difference between the two is that the M3 is equipped as a cavalry scout vehicle. So instead of holding 6 fully battle-equipped soldiers, it is designed to seat 2 scouts and hold additional radio, comms, equipment, and ammo. All right, some history. The first Bradleys were pressed into service in the early part of the 1980s. They are made by BAE Land Systems and Armaments. As you may expect, the Bradley got its name from U.S. General Omar Bradley, and the Bradley was designed primarily in response to some of the Soviet armored personnel carriers of the Cold War period, most notably the BMP. The Bradley had a few requirements, such as it had to be fast enough to keep up with the M1 Abrams tank, so if need be, the two vehicles could maintain formation. Also, I know it kind of looks like it for those that may not be totally familiar with it, but it's not a tank. This is a armored personnel carrier, so it's not totally designed to go toe-to-toe with a tank, but it had to be equipped to take out tanks from a distance. So one of its armaments is a TOW missile launcher. Now, TOW is an acronym for a tube-launched, optically tracked, wire-guided missile, and it's actually, if you look right here, this squared-off device would actually flip up, and you can see that the launcher actually, right here, this would house a couple of TOW missiles that can be launched, and those are tank killer rounds that would destroy tanks. In addition to that, you can see that the gun on this, the main gun, is a 25mm cannon. I already mentioned that it has the TOW missile launcher off to the left-hand side of the turret, and then it also has a coaxial 7.62mm machine gun. Now, some of the new ones have been retrofitted with either a 40mm grenade launcher or a 50 caliber machine gun, depending on whatever the specific mission requirement had for each of these Bradley fighting vehicles. So that's a little bit of history about the real machine. I gotta say, these are incredibly crucial on today's battlefield, especially in the Middle East, where we're dealing with house-to-house and urban environments. You can, as I said, in the M2 version, you can have 6 fully loaded combat-equipped troops in the back. That back door would essentially drop down, and you can have a small squad-sized group of soldiers ready to engage or hit a target, depending on whatever the necessary requirement is. Now, because it's a tracked vehicle, of course, as you may expect, it's not necessarily as fast as a wheeled vehicle would be, such as a Humvee or even the deuce and a half and 5-ton trucks. So you're not going to ever see Bradleys on target of a special operations unit unless they are there in support of the actual special operations unit that's going on, providing a security or blocking force, because they're just not fast enough. So you really would never see those. But in terms of them being used in mechanized and infantry units, you're going to see them all the time, specifically with the Abrams tanks and such. All right, turning on to the specific model review. This version is a old Boley casting. As you can see on the bottom, it initially had rollers on it that I took off. I painted the tracks with some silver paint to give it a little bit more realistic look. And of course, the rest was sprayed with some Tamiya Light U.S. sand color, official, the U.S. sand color for the defense. The little turret should be longer. I don't know why that they never made the turret barrel a little bit longer on these, but for whatever reason, they never did. These were offered in olive drab green and obviously this tan color. This version, as I mentioned before, was part of the early 2000s Walmart set, so it kind of came in this color, this actual brown dirt color, And it had some other offset colors of brown, some black camouflage. It just wasn't attractive at all. So again, I recently sprayed this to give it a more modern look. Some of the more casting details that's in there, you can see the track rollers as well. I mentioned this back part here would drop down. That's the troop compartment. The tow launcher up here. Right here, this piece is actually a grenade launcher that launches smoke grenades, which would also help aid the tank in terms of masking it if it needs to do that to hide itself. So that's this version of the Bradley that I have. This version is from Maisto, and it's an M3 version. So you can see here, this one has a more adequately equipped barrel. Try and say that 10 times fast. So it's a much longer, much better equipped. And yes, both of these are very close to HO scale. And just to demonstrate that the barrel spins much better, the turret spins much better on this one. I also added some paint on here as well to the tracks, as you can see, to give it some depth and bring out some detail. Now, these were part of the G.I. Joe sets that they did also in the early 2000s that could also be found at Walmart. They did every vehicle in Desert Tan, and then they also did every vehicle in Jungle Camouflage as well. So there's both of those. Now you can see the G.I. Joe logo and some sort of, I don't know what they were going for here with a number pattern on the side. I have removed it from the tan version. I have not yet wiped the decal from the camouflage version. So, there you go, collectors. That will conclude this version of Diecast Emporium Military Mondays, specializing on the Bradley Infantry Fighting Vehicle. I think this vehicle is fascinating because, again, for the untrained eye, as I mentioned, a lot of people think that this is a tank. It could not be farther from the truth. This is not a tank. It is not designed to go toe-to-toe against another tank in battle. It is simply designed to carry a squad of soldiers into battle or to support the M1 Abrams tank for mechanized infantry. Its armor is not very thick. It is not designed to deflect tank rounds if it's hit directly head-on. Now again, with some of the more new armor and reactive armor and the new cage kits that we have found since Fallujah in the past 15 or so years, the armor has gotten a lot better, but there are still some spots on these vehicles, like many of the light armored vehicles, that are still very susceptible to large IEDs, anti-tank mines, or even some RPG rounds if it's hit in the right spot. So there you go, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Tommy with Diecast Emporium. Take care, be well. I will see you in the next video review.